Do I have a story for you? It wouldn't be the type I tell my kids in their jammies, nor would it be the type that is quite ready for my show. It would be a tell-all book. Oh, and it would be good. But then I remember I'm not the sole author in my story, and others in my story would be impacted. This is where my personal principles of storytelling begin. The ironic thing with that first statement, though, is if you know what I do for a living. I host and own a national TV show that's dedicated to being a safe space for stories. However, I can't go there with mine, at least not yet. I'll tell you where I have gone, though. From the studio to prisons to even out of the country, we are on a mission to be a safe space for stories. So one might ask, how do you ask others to go there with their story if you don't with yours? And that is precisely what brings me here today. Now, my personal principles in storytelling will not be found in a textbook. In fact, one was formed when I was just 8 years old. For almost 3 decades, my whole story has been on hold, and my bio has read Tumultuous Childhood. You see, it was the 90s and in southern Oklahoma. I was in 2nd grade when my whole world changed. What was once a simple walk down the street with my family now turned to judgmental eyes, not just on my parents, but also on myself. It is our delicate chapters that are building a strong story. So I look out here today and I see a stadium full of storytellers. You, and you, we all have a story. But by owning a national TV show, I get asked what actually makes airtime. Now, keep in mind, I have a team, and there are many more levels that actually bring it to fruition. But I want to walk you through my first personal steps to airtime. The 5 tenets in journalism have always been who, what, when, where, and why. But I simply ask, how will this story change the world? And helping me identify that is the acronym of HOPE, H-O-P-E. The H stands for help. How will this story help our world? The O is for on time. Is this truly urgent? But what if we hit pause? The P is for peace. Will I sleep better or worse once this story is out? And the E is for exposure. What will happen once this story is exposed? It was the first time I got asked to interview a former terrorist, so I had to call the FBI. This former Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia leader wanted to sit down to talk about his life turnaround. So we went there. I hopped on a plane to Bogota and then a much smaller plane to the Colombia-Venezuela border. It was midway through the air that I thought to myself, why am I telling such a risky story? And then I remembered this prep call with La Muerte. La Muerte means death in Spanish. He said, Whitney, I have done really bad things, but I want kids in similar situations to know there's another way. His story helped the world. O is for on time. The next story came my way. I was extremely postpartum and slightly more anxious than I'd ever been in my life. And between switching off between a microphone and a breast pump, there was a lot going on. I found out about this mother's story. It was actually on the news. Her son was killed, and she was brutally beaten and left for dead. Her son was just 18 months old. As much as I wanted to save that for another season because it was just too close to home, I knew it was time. With a swollen face and heavy heart, we sat face to face. We moved the dial forward together. While still mourning, she marched and even turned her loss into a law. Her story was on time. The P in HOPE stands for peace. This is actually a very recent story and would have been on our current season. we learned about a lady over in Iran that was filming her fashion designs underground, like literally filming them in Iran and then sending the footage back to the United States for fashion shows. It was such an intriguing story, especially with everything going on. So we had the release signed, we had the in-studio interview, and even better, shocking behind-the-scenes footage that she was willing to share. However, with tensions rising in Iran, we knew that we might need to hit pause. It woke me up, literally in the middle of the night. Sometimes you must kill the story to not kill the person. That is the P in peace. The E is my last letter in the acronym of HOPE, and the E is actually the one that I developed first. It is the most personal to me. The E is for exposure. I think back to that 8-year-old, the one that in the middle of trauma and judgment still dared to dream big. In fact, I taped a tennis ball to an empty paper towel ring and made my first mic. And although my story is not fully out there because it involves more people than just myself, that doesn't mean that my story isn't impacting every area of my life. In fact, even the word hope that I bring you today. My parents' story, our story, unfortunately, could still harm her, and in today's climate, even be life-threatening. You need to know when to expose. So for now, my tell-all book will be on hold, but not forever. But I want to leave you with this. You have a story, and your story matters. How will you share it, and how will you change the world? Thank you.